Welcome back, everyone, to your Week 11 lecture. So, the stuff that we're going to be talking about today is going to be directly relevant to your final essay in UPP025, which is worth 50% of your overall mark. So what I'm going to start with today is just a quick quiz. So distance students, please feel free to kind of engage with this material on your discussion boards. So number one, how many readings are on the reading list for Essay 3? Do I need to look for extra sources? Do I have to submit my UPP025 essay on Milo? What do I need to submit along with my essay, and how can I make my writing academic or formal? So distance students, if you have any queries around this, talk to Fiona, get a lowdown from her as to what you need to do if you have any question marks around any of this material. So what referencing style should I follow? What guides have been made available? Where can I find them? There's a quick sort of correcting this reference exercise there, and can I use subtitles or subheadings in Essay 3? So again, distance students, if you've got any questions around these, speak to Fiona and clarify them because these are all directly relevant to your essay. Okay, so for today, we're going to go through what is synthesizing, using sources in your body paragraph, ensuring cohesion, and a quick 10-minute grammar point at the end. So firstly, what is synthesizing? We're starting with what it's not. So let's say you're writing an essay in which you discuss smoking and the health problems it causes, and you have 3 academic sources by Nathan, Harris, and Crawford. They cover some similar points and they cover some different points. You write an essay with 3 body paragraphs, and each paragraph summarizes the information from one source only. So your essay plan looks like the summarized article by Nathan, by Harris, and by Crawford. So what is it? Let's say you have the same question as before. You have the same 3 academic sources, so Nathan, Harris, and Crawford. They cover some similar points and some different ones. This time you write an essay with 3 body paragraphs, and each paragraph focuses on a theme or a point, and each paragraph includes relevant information by different authors. So the best piece of advice I can give you on this material is when you're organizing an essay, always divide by idea. What are the 3 points that you're going to be talking about? Be really clear about what each of those are, and then proceed accordingly in your essay. So for instance, here, your essay plan might look like these 3 themes or ideas. So lung cancer, child development, and heart disease. And you can see in the academic voices that this student is actually incorporating, that they naturally reach for other academic viewpoints as they need to. One thing that's really important to point out at this moment is that what we're not looking for you to do is to look for validation according to um, you having the same idea as someone else in academia. So if you have an idea, it doesn't prove the legitimacy of that idea that someone else has had that as well. It's more just giving us an understanding of what the academic discussion is and then situating yourself within that discussion. So synthesizing involves combining ideas from a range of sources in order to group and present common ideas or arguments. Unlike summarizing and paraphrasing, which only uses one author's idea at a time, synthesizing combines ideas from more than one text or source. So this is a really useful format to use if you want to try and organize your ideas. On the left-hand side, you can talk about what idea you have. So what is your idea? And then you can jot down what the different viewpoints of the different sources might be. So once you've taken notes from your readings, identify the common ideas or points from the different authors. In your body paragraphs, focus on the main idea or theme of the paragraph and illustrate and support this idea or theme with reasons and evidence from different sources if their information is relevant. So this is a good moment to go to, excuse me, this is a good moment to go to the RMIT handout and have a look at what they say about synthesizing. So this is available on Milo for you as well. But you'll see some examples on the RMIT handout, so, and you can spot it because it's in red. And you can look at how sources are used. So distance students, this is a good moment to kind of press pause here and go and find that handout if you haven't done so already, um, and get some more information on how this synthesizing can work. Um, Please follow the instructions on the handout. So that for the synthesizing activity, so with the RMIT handout, this gives you a bit of an overview. For the synthesizing activity, that's actually a separate document that you can go through. So again, distance students, this is something for you to go and um, find on Milo and work through. Um, so go through the instructions, note that the referencing style is slightly different to what we use in UPP, but it's a really useful activity to work through. So go and find that on Milo as well. So there'll be two documents that you're looking for on Milo. So a possible synthesis, so this is an example, preparing before a lecture is generally recommended as a means of maximising understanding, resulting in more efficient note-taking and learning. So this is a statement that's been made about preparation before a lecture, but you can see that it's actually supported by basically a number of different academic voices. They all say the same thing. So that's what you're referencing at the end is showing, is that there's a synthesis of ideas. We don't need to go through and find quotes from each of these three. They're all saying the same thing. Therefore, we're putting those all in together at the end. So part two, using sources in body paragraphs. So let's unpack a body paragraph on the handout provided. So again, looking at these handouts, consider the following. So paragraph structure, the use of sources, so when and how the writer has incorporated evidence, have they introduced sources, when and how, and in-text referencing. Um, so if you go through these moments, you can actually go and maybe start by critiquing another piece of work on the handout. So here we're going to look at a body paragraph. So a final point to consider in relation to chocolate is the perception that chocolate is linked to obesity. So that's clearly in orange because that's our topic sentence. Supporting sentences, a person is defined as being obese when their body mass index is greater than 30. The literature on chocolate and obesity has clearly demonstrated that there are no specific correlations between the two variables. So you'll notice that this student talks in general about the literature without saying who those people are, but the reference at the end with Beckett and Lambert there actually demonstrates where that information is from. So if a student or someone reading this wants more information, they can go and find those articles and read them for themselves. This is typified by the writings of Mellor, who found that over a period of 8 weeks of eating 45 grams of chocolate per day, a group of adults demonstrated no significant weight increase. So basically, that's kind of rounding off the idea and kind of linking back to the topic sentence. Let's look at a body paragraph. As Lambert notes, chocolate consumption alone is not likely to cause obesity unless large amounts of other calorie-dense foods are consumed, and this calorie-dense intake is greater than needed for bodily function, bearing in mind levels of activity. So with this one, the first thing I'd say here is that the sentence is a bit on the long side. And having marked a number of your essays now, sometimes that tends to be something that we can target in editing. So for your last essay that's worth 50%, target, if you're a long sentence writer, target that, make sure they're not too long. The stereotypical chocoholic seems to be more likely to consume many other sweet foods and be less likely to take exercise than other people. So, chocolate consumption is only one possible variable when considering the causes of obesity. So, with this one, I would say that the previous paragraph is a more successful body paragraph. Um, this one doesn't have the level of evidence in it, and we need evidence to construct a tight body paragraph. Now, cohesion. This is a big one, particularly as you're starting to look at the essay as an overall argument as well. So, how can we make our essays flow nicely for a reader? So, after your early drafts, you'll need to work on the structure and the overall argument, then the paragraphs, then the sentences, then the spelling and punctuation. So, really, with editing, it's about looking at the way paragraphs kind of flow into each other, as well as the way sentences flow into each other as well. So what is important for the reader? They need to clearly be able to identify the introduction and conclusion and the three main points that you have going through your essay. Your thesis statement, as we talked about in previous weeks, you need to state it close to the end of your introduction. You also need to put it in your conclusion, but not written exactly the same way. So if you're showing some ability as a writer, you're showing that you can vary your language to make it clearer. And then, is the whole essay coherent? Does it talk about the same idea? This is one really key point. If you have a thesis statement with a really clear overarching argument, that argument needs to be consistent through the whole essay. That's going to be one of your challenges as you work through this essay. You've also got to make sure that each paragraph is relevant to what you're doing. And does each paragraph have a sentence that introduces it, i.e., a topic sentence? So the sentence structure thing, I know I've talked a lot about this with my lecture in Hobart, but certainly make sure you're writing in full sentences. One way you can do that, because I know that it's quite challenging if you're someone who doesn't or isn't clear on the difference between a full stop and a comma, and I know that, again, having marked a lot of your essays, there are those of you out there. What I would suggest that you do is read your essay out loud to yourself as part of the editing process. Um, if you do that, you can often hear some of the errors. You can definitely hear sentences that are too long. But certainly the full sentence thing, it starts to train your ear to what a full sentence sounds like. So do try and read those out loud if you've got the time to do it. Um, then you can target the second bullet point here as well and think about whether or not you've put too many sentences into one sentence. So again, be really clear. Short sentences can be very powerful. So bear that in mind as you're going through your editing process. If you're unsure, it helps to read your sentences out loud. As I said, in both cases, really just doing that is a really important part of the process. And it helps to work out where to place commas. So it also has that bonus with it as well as a practice. Checking for typos as well. The general rule of thumb with essays is you want it to be as close to perfect as you can when it comes to typos. Um, I've still got a few people who are putting contractions into their work, so really try and target little things like that. But spelling errors, things of that nature, really try and target those because it's a really easy way to pick up marks. If you can just have no spelling errors, no punctuation errors, no typos of any kind, it makes your work look really professional. If you were to pick up a book or a newspaper and it had spelling mistakes in it, you probably wouldn't take it that seriously as an argument. But if it's something that's written perfectly and it's got all perfect spelling and grammar and things like that, you're going to take it more seriously as a piece of writing. So bear that in mind as well. So this is for you to think about other points that might help your essays to flow. I know that in Hobart I've talked about arranging your paragraphs so that they flow into each other. So the ideas, so idea one, idea two, idea three, and if you have idea four, that those ideas are actually in a reasonable and logical kind of sequence as well. So if you're feeling up to it, you might actually like to think about those implications for your essay as well. Signposting. Okay. So the other thing you can look at here, I probably wouldn't use any of these phrases on this slide, but certainly just guiding your reader a little bit with your language so that you can actually point out what you're going to be talking about in particular paragraphs. Okay, so now your 10-minute grammar point, we're going to look at semicolons here. Um, For its most common use, it may be helpful to think of the semicolon as a full stop. What comes before the semicolon, what comes after are in fact sentences. The word following a semicolon does not have a capital letter. So basically, semicolons are like the way you can test for a semicolon is if you put a full stop and basically the two clauses still make sense. The idea of a semicolon is that if you were basically it's two clauses that are dependent on each other for meaning in order to understand what's going on. So the man bought a new car, his wife didn't know about it. So they function as two different sentences. But if you put a semicolon in, that works as well because the two important points of information. The man bought a new car. His wife didn't know about it. You kind of need to know both of those in order to understand what's going on. The man bought a new car doesn't really give you the whole story. His wife didn't know about it, doesn't really give you the full story either. So they're two clauses that are dependent on each other for meaning. Elephants are associated with memory, lions are associated with majesty. So same thing is that you're kind of looking at a kind of landscape of animal behavior and metaphorical representation here, and they're dependent on each other for meaning. You can also use semicolons to separate items on a list, particularly when the list is quite long. So you can use it in these cases if you wish as well. Personally, um, I probably wouldn't use such a long sentence and so many semicolons, but this is something that is open to you if you wish to use it. A message about SA3. So, how do I manage the reading list? Again, as I've said to students in Hobart, you need to really get good at sort of skimming and scanning. Have a look at the titles, they will give you a clue as to whether or not that article is relevant. And read the abstract as well. The abstract of an article is there to give you a really brief overview of what this article is about and whether it's useful to you. I tend to still, in my personal writing practice, I tend to still skim over the article because sometimes the abstract doesn't tell the full story. But certainly, the titles, the abstract, and that skimming will give you an idea of what's in there. You don't have to read all 15 of the journal articles, but this will give you a shorthand way of dealing with that. And remember that we're teaching you how to sift through a lot of material for when you're in your bachelor degree or your associate degree as well. So, your independent learning tasks from this week, go over your notes from today because there is quite a lot in that. So, make sure that you understand that. Distance students, any questions, go to Fiona and talk to her about any of those gaps. And of course, work on SA3. That's the important thing as well. So the essay is due by Friday, the 11th of October. Remember that there's no lecture or tutorial next week. Why? So that you can focus on finishing your essay. So Hobart students, please feel free to come to the lecture and tutorial as usual, and I will work with you on your drafts if you wish for that assistance from me. However, your other units will go on as usual. So there will be a lecture, there will be a tutorial. That's not going to change. We're just giving you this time to spend on your final essay getting that right. And thanks so much, everyone. So have a wonderful week. Remember with your essay as well, I would strongly suggest you, in a lot of cases, you actually spend a little bit more time this time around on your editing. Obviously, spending time on the writing, getting the writing correct is important. But what I'm seeing in essays that I'm actually looking at is that students need to proportionally spend a little bit more time on the editing process as well, because you can actually pick up a lot more marks with that. So think about that as a piece of advice, and good luck for the week.